coming on the air with that desperate race to rescue people in Morocco. Crews searching through intense rubble for anybody who may have survived. As we're learning that more people have been killed after that huge earthquake, close to 2,700. Our team is live on the ground with the latest on the search and rescue mission and how the Moroccan government is now defending itself. Also, that huge manhunt for an escaped killer in Pennsylvania getting even bigger tonight because he apparently got out of the little perimeter police thought he was in, where they think he may be now, with the community on edge. Then boosters are back. The FDA late today just green-lighting new COVID shots that could start getting into arms just a matter of days from now. The real question, are people actually going to go out and get them? Plus, in tonight's Newsmaker, we go one-on-one with Andrew Yang, who says he's not happy with the potential for a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, how he wants to see the two-party system shaken up ahead of 2024. And an NBC News exclusive. One of the women, Danny Masterson, was convicted of raping, speaking now for the first time since his sentencing just days ago. What she's now saying about those controversial letters written in support of the star of that 70s show a little later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with a race against time for anybody else who may have survived that massive earthquake in Morocco. And tonight, a critical point, because the best chance to find survivors is that so-called golden window, 72 hours. That ends less than an hour from now. As we've just learned, nearly 2,700 people have been killed. At least 2,500 have been hurt, and those numbers are expected to go up. Look at this. Just today, rescuers are finally starting to reach some of those more remote villages in Morocco, up in the mountains, that were the hardest hit, cut off for days with no help. Some of these soldiers finding survivors, look at this, carrying them down mountains to trucks that'll end up taking them to the valley floor where they'll be able to get more medical help. People looking for survivors there, they're using their bare hands to dig through piles of rubble. There's not much equipment, and there are no machines in the remote High Atlas Mountains. Some places are still inaccessible, with roads blocked by mudslides. It comes as we're getting this look at the night it all happened.
Oh, my God.
That is the perspective from a rooftop in Marrakesh, the moment that 6.8 earthquake hits. You see everything shaking. That restaurant didn't collapse, but streets across the building did. Matt Bradley is live for us on the ground in Marrakesh and is joining us now. Matt, you have been out, I know, reporting on this for a day plus now. Where do things stand right now on the push, the race to find survivors?
Well, it depends on the place, Hallie. I mean, when we were out, we actually went to a village where essentially everyone was accounted for. And by that, I mean most of them had died. And this is a very small village where something like 90 to 100 people had died. They had just buried the last person in the last hour before we arrived. That is a different story. So there, they weren't scrambling to try to find anybody. There was no effort or race against time. There was just resignation and a feeling of a horrible loss. Now, in some of these other places, some of the more remote areas, they are trying their best, it seems. And my colleague Stuart Ramsey from Sky was in one of those places where they were still bringing out people who had survived. And the real issue here, as you mentioned, isn't so much getting to under the rubble, because unlike in other earthquakes, these are not tall buildings. These are small buildings. The real issue is getting to the place, getting out to these remote villages. And that's made more complicated by the fact that a lot of the roadways have also been destroyed by the same earthquake that destroyed so many of these homes and villages. So a lot of challenges facing these rescue workers. They're trying their best. But, you know, you mentioned that 72 hours is closing. They're still holding out hope, I believe, that they'll still be able to find some people.
Well, and we've seen it, Matt. I know you remember covering that Turkey and earthquake where people were found days after the earthquake happened, something like 10, 11 days, these miracles that we saw. There's also, of course, what do you do for the people who did survive, the people who do not have a home to live in, who may not have food, et cetera? There is a massive humanitarian effort on that front, too, tonight.
Yeah, I mean, the real difference here, Hallie, and yeah, you're right. I was there. I think we were speaking to each other when I was there in Turkey back in February. You know, that was a different story. You know, a lot of the construction materials in southern Turkey, they're more like the construction materials that you would see in the United States. Some of those construction materials and those walls that actually did withstand the fall, they protected people who were underneath them so people could survive. When I was out there in the Atlas village in these villages earlier today, those walls crumbled like sand. And that meant that it doesn't really look as though people are going to have spaces or cavities within the rubble where they can stay breathing and stay alive like we saw in Turkey. But again, this is an issue where, you know, after so many days, 72 hours, that golden window, you still are holding out hope that you're going to be able to find some people. And I think that's why we're starting to see this real frenzied search that may be coming to a close.
What about the response from the Moroccan government here? It seems as though there has been some criticism. They're now coming and defending the response to the earthquake after some concern they maybe weren't doing enough right away. What have you heard on the ground?
Yeah, when we spoke with people, you know, and I was expecting them to say that they were very angry with the government, they seemed a little less angry. And actually, some people that I spoke to said, look, the thing is, people here probably weren't even expecting that much from their government. These are people in tight-knit communities that are very far away from any government presence. So they weren't necessarily expecting the government to be there. They're there for themselves. And that was one of the things that I was told in this village. They said this is just a big family. So a lot of the rescue effort, a lot of the survival effort, it's essentially DIY. And that's what they're used to.
Matt Bradley, live for us there in Marrakesh. Matt, thank you so much for your reporting. I know we'll be talking again in the days and in the hours to come. Appreciate it. Back here at home, we are learning tonight the convicted murderer who got out of a Pennsylvania prison, escaping nearly 2 weeks ago. Turns out he could be practically anywhere by now. Police say Danilo Cavalcante slipped through the area where they thought he was hiding, meaning there's not like a contained perimeter now. In just the last couple hours, saying they believe he's still in Pennsylvania. That's after Cavalcante stole and then ditched a white van he took from a dairy farm. It was found something like 25 miles north of where police thought he was. Police think he may have gotten out of that old search perimeter by climbing through perhaps an underground tunnel or a drainage ditch. Watch.
No perimeter is 100% secure. It's not a wall. It doesn't have a ceiling. It doesn't have, you know, all of the things that you might normally use if you're trying to contain someone.
And what makes this search even harder now in day 12? Cavalcante looks different now than he did just a couple days ago. Look at this. These are new pictures of him on like a doorbell cam. He showed up at a former coworker's house asking for help. You can see in the pictures he changed clothes, apparently, somehow ended up shaving off the beard and the mustache he had in prison. He ended up making another stop at a different coworker's house. Neither of them were home. Both reported what happened, as police now warn they are going to go after anybody who helps Cavalcante. I want to bring in Marissa Parra on the ground in Pennsylvania. And Marissa, with this search perimeter now effectively all but irrelevant, where do police think he could be now?
Hey, Hallie. So we are just outside of the command center, and you'll remember it was just about a mile away at Longwood Gardens, those botanical gardens. That was where on Saturday they had that 4-mile search perimeter. They thought they were closing in on him, and then they made that escape, or rather Cavalcante made his escape sometime Saturday night before stealing that van, making his way to just outside of Phoenixville. And so when it comes to the question of where do they think he is now, well, you said it yourself. They think that he's still here in Pennsylvania. When they were asked why they believe that, they said because they have no reason to believe he's crossed the border. And so they're focusing their search efforts to East Nanville Township and northern Chester County. And for anyone wondering where that is, that's not too far away from where that stolen van was found. And so when we were pressing them on how things look, they said they actually believe that law enforcement has the advantage. Take a listen for yourself.
You mentioned before this was like a tactical game of cat and mouse. What changes now for your guys that are out there looking for him?
We're planning for the long game. The search in the woods was to Cavalcante's advantage. He was in an 8-square-mile area with very difficult terrain.
So in terms of why they think they have the advantage, remember, it was those botanical gardens were densely wooded. There were a lot of chances and ways for him to escape through drainage ditches and pipes that were running through, partially because of construction. So, Hallie, they are maintaining that they have the advantage here. That's at least what they're saying.
There's also this warning from police who say, hey, listen, do not try to help him. His sister is finding out the potential consequences for that, right? There's apparently been a process to get her deported after she didn't cooperate.
So she has been arrested by ICE, correct. Now, in terms of what we know, the circumstances around that, law enforcement has been very vague. We were asking, why now? Is this a tactical ploy to try to lure Cavalcante into cooperating? And they wouldn't really directly answer the question, but they did accompany that with a stern warning that anyone who they either suspect could be helping or they suspect could be in a position to help or isn't cooperating with the investigation, those are people that they are currently monitoring. They have a list of people who he has known, and they have said that anyone who is caught helping Hallie will be prosecuted. Back to you.
Marissa Parra live for us there in Unionville, Pennsylvania. Marissa, thank you. We are just learning in the last couple of minutes that Hurricane Lee is shifting a little bit, potentially maybe putting parts of New England in its track. It is still a Category 3 storm. It is barreling its way through the Atlantic Ocean right now. You see it there. We're still a few days out from Lee getting close to the U.S., so obviously things could change. But either way, starting today, beaches up and down the East Coast are starting to feel some rough surf and some pretty dangerous rip currents. It's all part of an Atlantic hurricane season that is running well above what's considered normal. We've already seen 3 major hurricanes so far, twice as many as we normally would this time of year. The whole season lasts through November. It is thanks to this El Nino year that, of course, brings those warmer waters that fuels these storms. I want to get to meteorologist Bill Cairns for more. So we have that 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern National Hurricane Center update. That was just within the last 10 minutes here, Bill. What should we know about the track, and where is your level of concern now?
Unfortunately, the odds of this thing just turning harmlessly out to sea are dropping. It appears that either Nova Scotia, Maine, or possibly Cape Cod and the islands is going to have to deal with what's left of the storm by the time it gets there, which will likely be almost like a powerful nor'easter or maybe a strong tropical storm or low Category 1 hurricane. It won't be a major hurricane like this by the time 5 days from now comes. So here's the new forecast map from the Hurricane Center, and it actually has been, Lee's been behaving. It missed all the islands, and now it's going to miss Bermuda and head an inside track, so that's great for Bermuda. They still could get some tropical storm gusts and some squalls, but that'll be about it for them. No matter what, we said this all along, we're getting the rip currents, the big waves on the East Coast all week long, even into next weekend. And here's the forecast from the Hurricane Center. By the time we get to Saturday afternoon, they take it anywhere, and this is the cone of uncertainty, remember. That shows the forecast area. It now includes Cape Cod, the islands, Boston, approaching the Maine coast, and Nova Scotia. And all of our little squiggly computer lines are targeting this area. It's worth noting none are bringing it directly into southern New England, Hallie. But, they have to prepare. There's leaves on the trees. It's going to be like a big nor'easter.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bill. Speaking of the leaves on the trees, right, some weather whiplash is coming in for us, too, with this cold front coming in.
Yeah, everyone on the East Coast is, they're over the humidity and these dew points and everything else. It's ready for a change. It's been an afternoon like Florida-like thunderstorms every single day. A lot of airport problems over the weekend. That continues tonight with these storms near New York City. You notice a few right over Manhattan right now, over by Newark Airport. So I'm sure there's ground stops and all that's going to happen again. But here it comes, that cold front. As we go through Tuesday, it moves to the Ohio Valley. It finally gets to the East Coast on Wednesday. By the time you get to Thursday, Hallie, you'll wake up in the morning, you can open the windows and finally breathe again.
Bill Cairns, that would be nice. Thank you so much, and thanks for keeping an eye on Lee. Appreciate it. Okay. In just the last couple of hours, we've learned the FDA is approving new COVID boosters from Pfizer and Moderna as we're seeing hospitalizations from COVID go up all around the country. These shots target a form of the Omicron variant, and you could be seeing shots in arms as soon as this week, as long as the CDC gives its approval to start handing them out. Nearly 70% of Americans are already considered fully vaccinated against COVID, but only 17% went out and got the latest updated booster. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Akshay Syal joins us now. So significant that finally we have the green light now from the FDA for these booster shots. And obviously by the end of the week, you could start seeing people get them. The question is, will people actually get them? We've only seen less than 1 in 5 Americans do it for the last round.
Yeah, Hallie, what we've seen with each successive booster is that with each vaccine dose, less and less people get them. But Hallie, you know what I will say? I think it's going to depend a lot about what this fall and winter season looks like, because what we've seen with COVID, with flu shots, and even with monkeypox or mpox, you know, once you know a lot of people who get it in your community, you tend to want to get the vaccine. So if we see a lot of cases, if people know, you know, my mom has it, my dad has it, my friends have it, maybe I should go get this vaccine. So I think a lot of it's going to depend on what we see here, Hallie. But I think, you know, just to set expectations, you know, with this each upcoming booster, the goal really, Hallie, is to keep people out of the hospital. So you may see people who get the booster and you may see people who still get sick. But odds are they aren't in the hospital. They are at home. It should hopefully be a mild illness. So I think setting expectations for what this booster is supposed to do is really going to be key here, Hallie.
That's an important point. Dr. Akshay Syal, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
The secretive North Korean leader appears to be making a rare trip outside his own borders tonight, with Kim Jong-un reportedly taking this high-security train ride to Russia. That is exactly the kind of meeting that has Western officials so worried, because they think Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin will probably talk about having North Korea give the Kremlin more weapons for its war in Ukraine, a scenario the national security advisor at the White House is warning against today. Janice Mackey-Frayer is in the region with more.
The Kremlin is confirming what had been expected for weeks, that North Korea's Kim Jong-un will visit Russia and meet Vladimir Putin. It's believed to be happening on the sidelines of an economic forum in Vladivostok, which is where the two leaders first met back in 2019. Kim is already apparently on an armored train heading for Russia. This meeting causes obvious concern for U.S. officials who believe that Russia and North Korea are in discussions for arms deals that could fuel the war in Ukraine. Neither side, of course, is confirming what's going to be on the agenda. North Korea's state media is saying that they will, quote, meet and have a talk. Russia is looking for suppliers, and for North Korea, a deal could be a political and economic lifeline. U.S. officials say they have intelligence that suggests that Russia is looking to purchase additional artillery shells, and in return, they would share satellite and nuclear submarine technology with North Korea. It's a sign of a deepening relationship between Moscow and Pyongyang, one that worries the White House. They say that if North Korea goes down this road, it would be a huge mistake, and that if there is an arms deal with Russia, that North Korea will, quote, pay a price.
Our thanks to Janice Mackey-Frayer for that reporting. Any minute now, the American explorer trapped in one of Turkey's deepest caves, who's been there more than a week, could be back above ground as this team of explorers is in the last leg of a rescue operation. Here's Mark Dickey just a few hours ago. Look at this. They're pulling him up like inch by inch on a stretcher. This cave is dark. It is so narrow. He got sick, Dickey did, 9 days ago while leading an expedition in a Turkish cave some 3,000 feet deep. The rescue process started this weekend, but you can see why it's taken so long. This is what they have to deal with. They got to get him in and around those tiny, narrow bends, those twists and turns. Molly Hunter is joining us now. Molly, where do things stand? Is Mark Dickey out yet?
Hallie, he's not out yet, but any minute, as you say, that is the hope. Rescuers told us several hours ago that they were targeting this window. They were hoping that between 5 and 6 p.m. Eastern time that he may get out. The last update we have from this huge mammoth rescue team, 190 people, Hallie, from more than 8 countries, said that they were hoping that he just had about 100 meters left. That's 328 feet. That was a couple of hours ago, so we are hoping that is even closer. And, of course, when you are that close to the mouth of the cave, the hope is that there's also a team up on the surface that can help. Hallie, that dramatic video that you were just showing, though, showing kind of that pulley system, that stretcher kind of heaving. Mark Dickey, of course, completely wrapped in, strapped in, cocoon. They call that patient packaging. What's remarkable about that video is that's just in these last 12 hours. That is the last 600 feet. That is the easier terrain, we're told, compared to the first 3,000 feet. Much more vertical, tighter areas, if you can believe it. And these rescuers, 150 of them, are real experts. They've been using small explosive hammers to basically blast those tunnels to get him through, Hallie.
Just so many challenges, you know, as you're describing here, Molly. It's sort of incredible to think that they were able to get him up what had been described as like Mount Everest in reverse here.
That's exactly right. We have to remember two things about Mark Dickey. The first is that he is an extremely experienced caver. He knew what he was getting into, and even when he got sick, and he was actually kind of alert enough about a week ago to give a video that we've seen of him talking. Of course, he was not stable enough to make it up on his own. He knows how challenging this terrain is. But actually, Hallie, I think we have a statement from the first Hungarian medical team that was able to reach him. They talk about him in a life-threatening, a serious life-threatening condition. They talk about the therapy had to be carried out in cave conditions. Hallie, get this, he actually had a blood transfusion underground. They talk about the cold, damp, dusty environments. This is a really challenging environment. Just to run you through the timeline as well, we understand that he became sick, this gastrointestinal bleeding. Again, we don't know exactly what it is, what the illness, what caused it. About 10 days ago, when someone was able to climb up to the surface with that news on Saturday, September 2nd, then September 3rd, the first team set off to help Dickey. On September 8th, that is Friday, his condition was stable. And on Saturday, just a couple days ago, the rescue mission began, and we are waiting for that optimistic good news, hopefully any minute, Hallie.
I was going to say, so many fingers crossed in so many parts of the world. Molly Hunter, stay close to a camera. We will look for that update. Thank you so much. Tonight, with the clock ticking fast, the big auto workers union says it is ready to negotiate 24/7, morning, noon, night, to try to avoid a strike against the big car companies. It comes as we're about to hear new details on one of those companies' new offers after a meeting with UAW over the weekend. Now, listen, the workers are threatening to walk out if they don't come to terms on a deal with GM, Ford, and Stellantis, Chrysler's parent company, by Thursday at midnight. That is the deadline. These union workers, the UAW, they want a pay raise, a shorter work week, better health care, and a better pension. I want to bring in Brian Chung with more on this. So it is, Monday evening. We've got until Thursday evening, basically. This potentially could be one of those negotiations that goes down to the wire. It seems like that is what experts think will happen if, in fact, it doesn't end in a strike altogether. Where do things stand, and what does it mean for people who want to buy a car anytime soon?
Yeah, more specifically, 11:59 p.m. on Thursday into Friday. Either way, it's not a lot of time. And what we're trying to argue here is the wage gains that auto workers feel they're deserved to. 46%. That's what the United Auto Workers is asking for in terms of compounded wage gains over the next 4 years. The best offer, at least as of now, comes from Stellantis, the maker of Chrysler. They're offering 14.5%. So that numerically shows you the chasm that exists between the automakers and the union at this moment. And can they resolve that by Thursday? If they can't, a strike would begin effectively on Friday at midnight, in which case there will be over 140,000 workers walking off the shift. That could lead to a further constraint on the amount of new cars available on the lot. And after prices already went up after the COVID and then after the supply chain disruptions of 2021 and 2022, that, Hallie, could only lead to further price increases on cars. But we'll have to see how all of that develops over the next few days.
Brian Chung will be watching lots, I know, in the next 72 hours. Appreciate it. Coming up, officials in Libya say thousands of people could be dead after a storm on the Mediterranean created some huge floods. Look at that. We've got more coming up in just a sec. Plus, the FDA is trying to figure out if something used in cold medicine actually works. What if it doesn't? We'll answer it after the break. The FDA is trying to figure out whether this common thing found in a whole bunch of over-the-counter cold medicines actually works. Phenylephrine is a drug that's used as a decongestant. It's in liquids and pills and nasal sprays. You probably put it in your own body if you're feeling stuffed up or just generally sick and you've taken some kind of medicine for it. It's in Sudafed PE, Vicks Sinex, Benadryl, allergy plus congestion. When you take this drug, like by mouth, so if you swallow it in a pill, it takes a little bit to get processed in your gut and in your liver before it gets to your bloodstream to have any effect. So pharmacists and doctors say really only a small amount actually gets to where it needs to relieve congestion. Some doctors don't even recommend it at all. If it's decided that phenylephrine is not effective when you take it by mouth, turns out the drug could get pulled off the shelves altogether. Ann Thompson is joining us now. Help us understand this idea that some of the stuff we take for our colds may not actually work on our colds at all.
I know, Hallie. It really sort of seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Especially when you consider that phenylephrine has been considered generally recommended safe and effective since the 1970s. But since 2005, there have been a growing number of studies that have looked at the effectiveness of what's commonly called PE. And these studies have found in some cases that it's no more effective than a placebo. That's if you take PE in a pill or liquid form. In a nasal spray, it still works. So the FDA is looking at this narrow lane, if you will, and looking at whether PE works in medicines, like you said, Sudafed PE, or Dayquil and NyQuil Severe. You'll see phenylephrine on the ingredient label. So that's what they're going to decide. And then this will begin, if they decide it is not effective, this will begin the long process of whether the FDA will pull that generally recommended safe and effective designation from PE and ultimately take those products off the shelf.
There's a difference, though, between this drug and the kind that you have to go to ask your pharmacist to give to you over the counter, right?
Right. That's something called pseudoephedrine. And that is, you'll find it in plain old Sudafed and other types of medicines. You don't need a prescription for that. You just need to talk to your pharmacist, and it's behind the counter because way back when, 20 years or ago, people could buy a lot of it and make meth out of it. So they moved the medicine behind the counter to limit how much people bought at any one time. That is effective. That is not in question. And we talked to other doctors who said, look for those 24-hour antihistamines. Those work. Anything with D in it, basically like Claritin D or something like that, those work. It's the medicines with PE in their name. Those are the ones that are in question.
Ann Thompson, thank you so much for breaking that down. We'll see what happens there. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, more than 2,000 people could be dead after serious flooding in Libya, according to some East Libyan leaders there. Look at this. This is what the streets look like. At least 61 people have been confirmed killed. Thousands of others are missing. But that number does not include the city of Derna, which seems to be hardest hit. An East Libyan leader said it was declared a disaster zone. All of this triggered by a major storm in the Mediterranean. Number 2, the American Red Cross says there is a national blood shortage and it needs donations ASAP. Why? Well, they had to cancel a whole bunch of blood drives because of climate disasters. They also saw fewer donations in some spots. The Red Cross says the national blood supply is now down by about a quarter in just the last month, calling that critically low. Number 3, take a look at this. This is Hawaii's Kilauea volcano erupting, one of the most active volcanoes in the world. It is really an incredible sight. It's been quiet for the last few months, and the good news here, there's no threat to anybody nearby. It's just quite the sight to see. Number 4, 2 people were reportedly not allowed into a Drew Barrymore show taping today. They say over wearing Writers Guild pins. The show says it regrets what happened and that it's in the process of offering the fans new tickets, but they didn't offer any more specifics there. That's after Barrymore says the show's coming back for a 4th season and that it will comply with the rules of the ongoing writer's strike. Number 5, Technomechanicus. The 3rd child Elon Musk has had with his on-again, off-again girlfriend Grimes that we're just now learning about thanks to an upcoming biography about Musk. He has multiple children, and that is the latest. Tomorrow, the Justice Department starts to take on Google in what's being called the biggest tech monopoly trial in decades. What's at stake here for the government? It's a chance for the DOJ to prove it can actually win an anti-monopoly case in this digital age. But Google wants to keep what it has, which is dominance of the search market in this country. And for everybody else, the rest of us, the government says opening up the market to other companies could end up with more innovation and could change the whole landscape of the internet as we know it. Jake Ward has the breakdown.
When you go to search the web from almost any phone, Google is your default way of doing it. But that's no coincidence. Google pays Apple and others to make sure that's the case. Now, a suit from the Department of Justice and a coalition of 39 states asks, do those deals keep competitors out of the market and give Google illegal dominance in the process?
Essentially, every smartphone that people get has Google as the default search, and it's baked into everything. And that means we don't have a competitive advertising market.
Google has about 88% of the domestic search market and over 70% of the market for the ads you see when you search, which is most of how the company makes money. But the company argues that using Google isn't mandatory and that Apple and others chose to charge for the default placement, a perfectly legal arrangement.
We think there are a lot of different ways people are choosing to get information these days. And on the choice side, it's never been easier for people at home to be able to choose a different web search.
United States versus Google is in many ways United States versus big tech, a test of whether the government has legal authority to rein in corporations that wield historic power over how we access information. The government is hoping to do better than the Federal Trade Commission has. The case goes to trial after a string of recent court losses for the FTC, which has unsuccessfully tried to stop acquisitions by companies like Microsoft and Meta. But an anti-monopoly nonprofit says these are the right battles to fight.
A very intentional effort has been made for the past 50 years to chip away at the federal antitrust laws and to make them harder to enforce. And right now, the monopolies of our time are increasingly in big tech.
Google faces more than just this case. An antitrust suit filed in January accuses it of also being a monopoly as it sells the technology that powers the way online ads are placed across the web, and that's its second largest source of revenue. Google says the market is wide open there, too. But Google's biggest worry at the moment is presumably not this case. It is instead the rise of AI-powered chatbots like ChatGPT, which threaten to replace the classic search engine that made Google one of history's richest institutions. Its business model under attack in the market, even as it must also defend it in court.
Jake is joining us now. Jake, I think we got to lay out the stakes here, right? Huge deal. There's one expert who called this the antitrust trial of the century. I mean, this is the government taking on Google here. What does it mean for everybody else if, in fact, the DOJ, the government, were to win?
Well, Hallie, it would definitely be a big turning point. Everybody is basically watching this to see whether, as we enter this era of AI and incredible power on the part of big tech, whether authorities at the state or federal level have the opportunity to steer that boat, or whether tech companies are going to basically enjoy the same kind of unregulated, largely unregulated environment that they have until now, Hallie.
Jake Ward, thank you very much. We'll be talking more about this one, I am sure, in the days to come. When we come back, some pretty scary dash cam video out of Utah. Look what flew at somebody's car. We're going to get into it later in the local, what happened there. Plus, one of the change makers in the last presidential cycle joining us one-on-one for the Newsmaker tonight. What he thinks of 2024 and the people running in it. Next. Some new concern tonight for Democrats over what the latest polls show is a really tight 2024 race between President Biden and former President Trump. With Mr. Trump polling better right now than he did at any point in the run-up to the 2020 election. Take a look at some of these recent numbers from a few big pollsters. Relative ties, essentially, right, for Mr. Trump, with more than half of Democrats telling NBC News in our latest poll that they want President Biden to step aside. Among those who think we should have more options across the board, former 2020 candidate Andrew Yang and founder of the centrist Forward Party. He's calling for President Biden to engage more with third-party candidates. He even wants him to debate Democratic challenger Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Andrew Yang is joining us now. Mr. Yang, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Hallie.
Of course. So listen, we just laid out some of those poll numbers showing that this is, in many ways, a far closer race than presumably President Biden's team would like to see. I know you're not a part of the Democratic Party officially any longer, but I wonder what you make of that, the fact that this does seem to be such a neck-and-neck competition 14 months out.
It's deeply troubling and distressing to a lot of Americans that we may have a Trump victory in 2024, as hard as it is to say that sentence out loud. And I'm someone who thinks that the Democrats should have a more robust primary process so that if it is Joe, that people are confident in his vitality and energy. And if it's someone other than Joe, then maybe we could have someone who generates a whole different type of excitement and enthusiasm among Democrats and Americans.
You talk about the potential for a Democratic primary, a more robust primary in the Democratic field. One of the things that you said recently was that you believe that President Biden should debate one of his Democratic challengers, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We've talked about him on our show, his positions. He is polling, 50-plus points behind President Biden right now. You know, it is not typically the tradition for a sitting president to debate any comer, if you will. Why do you think this debate should happen?
Well, I think for both supporters of Robert Kennedy and Marianne Williamson, it would make them feel like they were heard, like their candidate had a real forum, and then it makes it less likely that one of them, let's say Robert Kennedy, would run in the general as an independent or even a libertarian, which right now I see as a distinct possibility. And he'd have a point because he'd say, look, I never even got a fair shake. There was never any real debate, so it's on to the general. And if you look at the neck-and-neck polling in the general, one of the main things that could determine the outcome is whether there are candidates running as a Green Party or independent or libertarian or some other ticket.
You talk about this idea, right, of a third-party candidacy. Senator Bill Cassidy was on Chuck Todd, our colleague's final edition of Meet the Press, just 24 hours ago, talking about the idea of a no-labels potential candidacy. Now, I know that your, Forward, who you work with, of course, with the goal of giving people an alternative, you've already said you're not going to run a third-party candidate this election. But let me play for you what the senator had to say.
It is something you'd be open to.
Yes, put it this way. 70% of the American people want something different. Should there be another option for the American people? And I think plausibly there should be.
In a race that could depend on the will of, as you know, just a few thousand voters, do you believe that no labels is encouraging potential for spoiler candidates, so-called?
Well, if you have $1 trillion franchise like American democracy, it makes sense to me to invest in an alternative. But I have looked at the numbers. One reason why Forward has said, look, we're staying out of this particular cycle is that, for example, if I ran, I think I would increase the chances of Donald Trump winning. And I'm an anyone but Trump guy. I personally would not do something that would increase the chances of Trump winning. So if we had a more modern voting system like ranked choice voting, then you'd have more alternatives, and that's something that Forward is championing. But given the current system, I'm a numbers guy, I'm a math guy. If you look at the numbers, someone like me running would probably lead to something very, very negative.
You talk about Americans wanting choice. That's been one of the sort of foundations of Forward, of the things that you've talked about here. There's a lot of options on the Republican side, right? There's almost a dozen candidates, but you know where former President Trump stands. He's leading most national polls by like 30, close to 40 points here. Why do you think nobody else in that field is gaining traction?
Well, Donald Trump has a very strong relationship with the base. He was the president, and he'd established something of a public persona over the previous years. So if you imagine a new candidate on the scene trying to somehow catch up to Trump and surpass him in the public consciousness, particularly among the Republican base, it's a lot to do in a very short period of time. It's one reason why I expect that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, unfortunately. I publicly donated to Chris Christie in part as an anti-Trump effort. I'll support just about anyone who's running against Trump. But as a math guy, like you said, he's up 35, 40 points. I don't see that changing by early next year. And so you probably will have a Trump nomination out of the Republican Party.
If you could give the Biden campaign any advice, not that they necessarily might want to hear it from you, sir, but if you could, what would you say?
I would say, look, we need to tackle the issue of succession. The reality is that I campaigned for Joe Biden. I voted for Joe Biden. And I think Joe Biden was the right candidate for 2020. But there are a lot of people who are reasonable and traditional mainline Democrats who are saying, look, I wish that we had other choices. And when you talk about the robust Democratic primary I would like to see, I'm talking about Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor J.B. Pritzker, Governor Phil Murphy, Governor Roy Cooper. Imagine that debate stage. We're not talking about the folks who are currently running necessarily. There are a lot of very qualified, eminent Democrats who've been told not to run because the DNC said, hey, wait your turn 4 years from now. We do not have 4 years. The American people deserve a real choice this cycle. And if we end up with the wrong candidate and something unfortunate happens, we could wind up giving the country back to Trump. The American people deserve better than that.
Will you campaign for President Biden again, do you think?
Again, I'm an anyone but Trump guy, and I think that there are a few things we could do that would decrease the chances of a Trump presidency. Democratic primary is one, supporting his opponents is another, and I'll be doing anything I can in succession to try and keep Trump from becoming president again in 2024.
I know that we're talking lots about politics. That's obviously the big news. You have your own big personal news, which is your book out tomorrow. It's called The Last Election, and it's sort of, in broad strokes, centers on this sort of third-party candidate who's gaining steam in the election, et cetera. You said something interesting in a statement that this falls in, as you describe it, the long tradition of paranoid political thrillers. But this time, you say the paranoia is very much justified. Explain that.
So there's something called a contingent election, Hallie, that if no one gets a majority in the Electoral College, then it gets thrown to the states, with each state getting one vote. Now, this is something that has not come to pass in American life during our lifetimes, but it's something that becomes a more and more real possibility, where in this coming cycle, Cornel West is running. As I said, I think RFK may run in the general. You talked about potential no labels unity ticket. You could have 3, 4, or 5 candidates. And in that scenario, you could wind up with things that we have not seen in decades in American life. So a lot of unimaginable things are back on the table, and we have to be aware of them to hopefully modernize our way out of it.
Andrew Yang, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. You can pick up The Last Election tomorrow anywhere books are sold. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it'd be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Northeastern Bureau, a school board in New Hampshire has now voted to suspend an entire high school cheerleading squad over bullying allegations. The superintendent, in a letter to parents, says the team has a toxic and pervasive culture of bullying, harassment, and discrimination, and that includes athletes, coaches, and parents. Officials say the suspension will last until towards the end of the month. The coaching staff is also on leave while there's an investigation. Out of our Midwest Bureau, protesters burned several American flags outside a Jason Aldean concert near Chicago over the weekend. The group, led by the Revolution Club Chicago, was protesting the singer's song called Try That in a Small Town. It has lyrics warning people not to be violent, not to swear at police, or burn the American flag in small towns. According to the Chicago Tribune, there were no confrontations between people at the concert and these demonstrators. And out of our Western Bureau dash cam, look at this, a pretty scary moment out of Utah. A car was driving on the highway when, boom, that's a chair, an office chair. Out of nowhere, like the legs of it there, it obviously shattered the window of that car on the passenger side. Somebody was sitting there. Fortunately, she only had a few cuts on her legs. Nobody else was hurt. No clue where that chair came from. Coming up here on the show, one of Danny Masterson's victims, speaking publicly now for the first time exclusively to NBC News. What she's calling justice and her thoughts on Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis's apology video. We'll be right back. In an NBC News exclusive, we are hearing now for the first time from one of the 2 women that 70s show star Danny Masterson was convicted of raping. This is since his sentence here. The woman, identified in the trials as Jane Doe number 1, tells NBC the sentence seemed like justice to her, adding it was nothing extra and nothing less. Masterson now faces 30 years to life in prison. This interview is coming just days after actors Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher, who were, of course, co-stars with Masterson on that 70s show, it propelled them all to fame, apologized for their character witness letters defending Masterson. Listen.
They were intended for the judge to read and not to undermine the testimony of the victims or re-traumatize them in any way. We would never want to do that. And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Kunis's letter had described Masterson as, I'm quoting here, an amazing friend, confidant, and above all, an outstanding older brother figure. Kutcher described him as an excellent role model and an extraordinary, honest, and intentional human being. I want to bring in Steve Patterson now with more. So let me start here with what we're hearing now exclusively from Jane Doe 1, who is also kind of sharing her thoughts on this apology video from Kunis and from Kutcher. Tell us about it.
Well, first, Hallie, if I could, I'd like to set up sort of the overall discourse, because it's more than just this Jane Doe, which we got that exclusive statements for. There's a lot of discourse online, especially, and it's sort of sickening the regularity that we cover the misbehavior of celebrities and the cancellation of celebrities, that I sort of knew where to look, which is the fact that all comments on that apology video are delisted. So if you look at the next video down, you will find vitriol and a lot of criticism, and the overall sentiment that this apology was more apologizing because they got caught and less about a direct, sort of thorough, somber message to sex assault victims, which I think is what a lot of people would have liked. So this is pretty widespread, that sentiment. And that sort of relates to what Jane Doe number one, this person that we got the statement from, pertains to say. She writes in a statement, and I want to show it on camera for you. She says that, quote, "This video was incredibly insulting and hurtful. My hope is that they learn radical accountability and that the importance of self-education to learn when to keep their privilege in check, especially Aston, who claims to work with victims of sex crimes, and Mila, I can only think of times up." That's alluding, of course, to Ashton Kutcher, who's done a lot of work relating to sexual assault victims and trying to prevent sort of sexual misbehavior over the course of almost a decade now. So we have that. There's also other celebrities speaking out, like Christina Ricci, who's been telling folks that, you know, although we know these quote-unquote awesome people, that they can misbehave in ways that we have no idea about as well. She threw up this on her Instagram. Unfortunately, I've known lots of awesome guys who are lovely to me, but have been prone to abusive privately. So this is sort of the sentiment that we're hearing a lot from celebrities, but also a lot from just normal people, sex survivors themselves, sex abuse survivors themselves, who say that this is not good enough, and they want to hear more from this celebrity couple. Hallie.
Steve Patterson, thank you very much for that reporting. Appreciate it. Yeah. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now. We are coming on the air with that desperate race to rescue people in Morocco. Crews searching through piles of debris for anybody who survived. The number of people dead continuing to go up after that huge earthquake killed close to 2,700. Our team is live on the ground with the latest on the search and rescue mission and how Morocco is defending itself tonight. We are also just learning, literally in the last 10 minutes or so, breaking news out of Turkey. The American trapped in one of the deepest caves there is finally out after more than a week. We're going to bring you the latest from our team on the apparently successful end to this massive rescue mission. Also, that huge manhunt for the escaped killer in Pennsylvania expanding tonight because he got out of that perimeter police thought he was in, what he looks like now, and where they think he could be. Plus, boosters are back. The FDA just greenlighting new COVID boosters that could start going into arms in a matter of days, those shots. The real question, are people actually going to go out and get them? Plus, in tonight's breakdown, the Justice Department set to take on big tech in the biggest trial of its kind in decades. We'll talk about what's at stake for the government, for Google, for you, and why it could change the landscape of the internet altogether. That's later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with a race against time for anybody who may have survived that massive earthquake in Morocco. And tonight, it is a critical point because the best chance to find survivors, that so-called golden window of 72 hours, has ended. As we've just learned that 2,700 people have been killed, just about. At least 2,500 people have been hurt, and those numbers are expected to go up. Look at this. Just today, rescuers are finally starting to get to some of those more remote villages up in the mountains of Morocco that have been cut off for days. They didn't have any help until now. You're seeing here some of those soldiers carrying people down the mountain to trucks that'll take them to the valley floor. They're going to get more medical help there. People looking for survivors are digging with their hands. With just their hands, there's not much equipment. They can't get some of that heavy machinery up into the remote high Atlas mountains. And then some places are still blocked off because of mudslides. Some people telling teams out there that they have been left with nothing.
I have nothing left. Now I sleep on the street. Everything has come down with our clothes and everything. We are just sitting here in the streets.
It is just a nightmare. Days after that 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck, as we're getting some new video in the moments that it happened. Watch.
Oh my God.
That's new video taken from a rooftop restaurant in Marrakesh. Obviously, everything shaking there. The restaurant itself did not collapse, but buildings across the street did. Matt Bradley is on the ground in Marrakesh and is joining us now. Matt, you have been out there talking to people. We talk about this so-called golden window, 72 hours since the earthquake happened. And while that is closing now, it does not necessarily mean that miracles are impossible. You were in Turkey where they found people incredibly 10, 11 days after the earthquake there, right?
Yeah, when you think about it, Hallie, I mean, 72 hours, it is kind of an arbitrary number. Now, it's more of a rule you can break. And yeah, when I was in Turkey just a couple of months ago talking to you, we saw some incredible things, some beautiful, life-affirming things, people being pulled out of rubble 5, 6, 7 days, as you mentioned. You know, the 72 hours, it depends on the person, it depends on the circumstance, it depends on the weather. So, you know, none of this is a hard and fast rule. But yes, there is an issue when you put someone in the elements for hours, for days, without food, without water, sometimes suffering terrible injuries and exposure, then, you know, that does diminish their chances of survival. And this means these past 72 hours, this was the best time that they could find some of these people. But, you know, this is a totally different circumstance from Turkey. The construction there was built in such a way where there were walls that were intact. And some of those walls, even though they were falling on people, in some cases, if they fell the right way, they would create a small cavity that people could live inside for days on end. When we went up to the Atlas Mountains just a couple of hours ago, we saw what looked like very rudimentary construction that had essentially crumbled. It did not look to me like there were cavities where people could survive inside of those places, especially not if the government and if the aid workers aren't able to reach them in time. Hallie?
There's also, of course, the matter of what happens to the people who did survive. We heard from that woman describing how she has nothing. She just has nothing left. They have no house, they have no food, and there is now this massive mission that is humanitarian in nature to try to help these folks.
That's right. And the people that we spoke with, you know, actually, it was remarkable, Hallie. We were with this woman, grandmother. She was in a tent, and she was smiling and laughing the whole time. I asked her, why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? And she said, it's either that or I cry. And she was serving us tea. Even though she had absolutely nothing left, she insisted that my team and I sit down with her and have tea. She gave us bread and jam with butter, with honey and olive oil. It was very generous, and she was in remarkably good spirits. You know, it was an incredible thing to see. Again, I'm going to use that phrase again, life-affirming. You come to these disaster zones and you see some horrible things, but you see some beautiful things in the midst of it all. Hallie?
It is incredible to hear that moment of humanity, Matt, in the midst of it, that you're being offered tea and bread with honey. I mean, it just speaks so much to, I think, the resilience and the attitude of the folks that you're talking to there. I wonder what they say about the Moroccan government, because there had been some criticism, right, that the government wasn't doing enough. You're now seeing officials come out and defend the response to this earthquake here. Tell us more about that piece of it.
Yeah, well, the first time we heard from the government really defending their response against some withering criticism. But, you know, when we were out there, we talked to a lot of people. They weren't really singling out the government for blame. The fact is, Hallie, and I was speaking with some folks, they don't necessarily expect the government to do much anyway. These are folks who live in very remote villages where the government doesn't necessarily have much of a presence even before the earthquake. So they were relying solely on each other. And somebody put it to me this way: this whole village is a family. And we were helping each other from the moment this happened. So they knew that they were alone, and they weren't expecting the government to intervene. And when they're expecting housing. That's the thing. But that's not going to happen immediately. That's in the medium to long term.
Matt Bradley, live for us there in Marrakesh. Matt, we're glad to have you out there bringing us some of those stories. Thank you. Appreciate it. We've also got some breaking news from overseas coming into us in just the last 10, 15 minutes. That American who's been sick and trapped in one of the deepest caves in Turkey is finally out. Mark Dickey is above ground for the first time in days after this incredibly complicated rescue. This is him. So we don't have the video of him out of the cave just yet. Like, I'm not kidding. This really did just happen. They haven't turned around that tape, but this is what it looked like earlier this afternoon. You can see him in a stretcher. They're pulling him up just little bit by little bit in this pulley system. Remember, Dickey started bleeding inside his stomach, basically. He had gastrointestinal bleeding. That's why this whole mission has happened. He was down at the bottom of this very deep cave, 3,000 feet underground. They've had to get him up these twists and turns and narrow passageways, as you're about to see from this kind of diagram of the cave. That's part of what took this rescue mission so long. I want to get now to Molly Hunter, who is following all of this for us. So, Molly, it is good news, right? It is good news on the news that Mark Dickey appears to be out and safe. They covered something like 68 feet, I think, in the last 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, Hallie, since we've spoken, they've covered 68 feet. So about 90 minutes ago, I guess, we were told the latest we had was about 100 meters, 300 and something, 20-something feet. Well, in the last 45 minutes, we were told 21 meters. Literally 10 minutes ago, we were told he had exited from the cave. This is really happy news, exactly what they were looking for. Earlier today, Hallie, as we spoke, the rescuers said they hoped that he might come out between 5 and 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll just pass that mark, but really excited. As you showed those pictures, those were just from today. That was the last 600 feet that he has crossed, that he has traversed with the help of expert search and rescuers on that pulley system. He's strapped in to that stretcher. The plan now, Hallie, is he will be assessed. He's in a medical tent. That is all the information we know. As you just mentioned, we haven't even seen video of what we expect to probably be cheering, clapping, very relieved search and rescuers. We know his fiancée was up near the site of the cave entrance earlier today. But what the plan is, he will be assessed on site, and then there is a helicopter waiting to airlift him to a state hospital in Mersin, Turkey. Hallie?
Part of what's so incredible here is the fact that he did have this internal bleeding, essentially. He had recovered enough to be alert and conscious. We showed some of those clips on the show over the course of the last 5 days or so of him speaking. He was talking with rescuers, and it feels like one of the critical pieces to this was that Dickie was not some tourist. Right. He was not on some random he is somebody who understands caves. He understands expeditions. He understands exploring. I mean, he's a very sort of experienced person in this realm.
Yeah, he is a seriously experienced caver, and actually some of his colleagues who've been speaking in the last week or so have been saying, basically, you have to understand that he is one of the most elite cavers in the world. There are a couple thousand people who do what Mark Dickey does. He knew exactly the scenario. He knew exactly kind of the environment, the terrain, the conditions, cold, at night, wet, dusty, very hard conditions to certainly live in, to climb in, to work in, much less get a blood transfusion in, get the medical care. But we did see that video last week, Hallie. I know you guys have seen it. He says, look, I'm alert, I'm awake. He says, I'm not healed inside. I'm going to take need a lot of help to get up to the top. More than 180 rescuers from 8 countries helped him up. We're told that 150 were expert. And Hallie, when you look at that video, it is so technical, that pulley system getting him up. And like we were told earlier today, that video is just kind of the last 600 feet, which was much more gradual, we're told, than the first kind of 2,500 feet below that.
It's wild to think about, and Molly, just a joy to be celebrating some good news, the survival of Mark Dickey and the rescue of him tonight. Molly, thank you. We are learning tonight, we'll take it to Pennsylvania, where the convicted murderer who escaped from a prison there a couple weeks ago, well, he could be almost anywhere at this point. That's because police say Danilo Cavalcante slipped through the area where they thought he was hiding, meaning there's not like this contained perimeter now, with police saying they do think he's still in Pennsylvania. This is after he stole and then ditched a white van he took from a dairy farm 25 miles north of where police initially thought he was. That's the van there. So how did he get out of this supposedly contained perimeter? Police suspect maybe he climbed through like an underground tunnel or got through a drainage ditch. Watch.
No perimeter is 100% secure. It's not a wall. It doesn't have a ceiling. It doesn't have, all of the things that you might normally use if you're trying to contain someone.
So what makes this search even harder now in day 12? Well, Cavalcante looks a lot different now than he did before a few days ago. Look, these are some new photos of him on a doorbell camera. He went to a former coworker's house trying to get help. So look, you can see left versus right? He changed his clothes. He shaved his beard and his mustache. That's kind of the biggest change. He stopped at a different coworker's house. Neither of them were home, and then both went and reported what happened. Police now say they are going to go after anybody who helps Cavalcante. I want to bring in George Solis, who is on the ground live for us in Pennsylvania. You have been covering every minute of this, George. I know you've been pressing police as to how Cavalcante could still be gone even now. What are they telling you, and where do they think he is? Still in PA?
Yeah, Hallie, they certainly don't think he's making it any easier for them at this point. Having broken that initial perimeter, first it was 8 square miles, then 4 square miles. Then he gets into that van that he steals. He slips past that perimeter. 400 officers, federal agents, a lot of equipment. He gets by. He goes to these former co-workers' house. He appears on doorbell camera. One of those photos, he appears to have a bit of a smug look to him. I asked authorities today, do they think he is winning? And he said no. He seems desperate. He seems like he is trying to reach out to people that he hasn't had any kind of contact with, but he is trying to find anyone at this point that may assist him. They say he got that hoodie, that green yellowish hoodie, from inside of that van that he stole from the dairy truck. They don't know where he got the razor to shave, but that drastically shifted appearance obviously presents a problem. So now they're asking the public, basically outside of this perimeter that they don't have now, to really get familiar with that look to see if they can help identify him. I asked U.S. Marshal Rob Clark, who has been instrumental in organizing a team of marshals out there to try and search, saying, is this going to make your job a little bit easier? They told me earlier it was like playing a game of tactical cat and mouse inside of this densely wooded area. He says this is actually going to potentially help them now that he's out in the open. Listen to what he told me today at the press conference. You mentioned before this was like a game of tactical game of cat and mouse. What changes now for your guys that are out there looking for him?
We're planning for the long game. The search in the woods was to Cavalcanti's advantage. He was in an 8 square mile area that with very difficult terrain.
Yeah, so what happens now, right? You said there is no perimeter, so now we know there's a lot of different police agencies sort of mobilizing around Upper Chester County. We've been sort of here in the middle of it all. They're looking, they're searching, they're tracking down leads. They're not being, again, fully transparent, which is something I have been pressing them about. Why not just say what you're doing? Why not just let us know where you think he's going so the extra set of eyeballs from the public can assist you here? They're saying they still know what they're doing. They're not going to have as much manpower using all of this, but they say that's also by design. They just say that they are still confident at this point, Hallie, that they have him contained here in Pennsylvania, not only Pennsylvania, but still within Chester County.
Right, with this specific county. I'm struck, George, by how you talk about the idea that he is sort of grasping at former coworkers, people who used to know, et cetera. Help us piece that together, because you're talking to somebody he used to live with, and it's given you some new clues as to who this guy even is, right?
Yeah, we spoke to his former roommate today, who at the time says he had no idea he was even wanted for that murder in Brazil. He was just someone that was referred to him through a friend of a friend. We all know how that happens. Lived with him. He said it wasn't a guy who really resonated or, you know, struck him as odd in any way. Didn't bring over the girlfriend. He was concerned that there was some anecdotal information that maybe he got into a fight. So he pressed him. He said, hey, do you have any trouble with the law? Anything I should know about? Kept quiet. He said that he didn't see him for weeks at a time. And then there was some sort of argument right before he fled, and he was arrested in Virginia after having committed that murder in 2021. And again, this really just caught him by surprise. He says he's anxious. He's living in fear now because he knows that he's reaching out to people that he formerly knew. He says he's really on edge about it, and his anxiety's creeping up. A little bit more of my conversation with the roommate. Take a listen. What was he like as a roommate?
Super quiet guy, really shy, wouldn't talk much. He wouldn't start a conversation.
That's Franco Rosa there that you just heard from. And I asked him, well, at this point, has he reached out to you? Has he made any attempt to communicate with you? And he says no. And the second that he does, heaven forbid for him, he says he's going to call police, which is the exact thing police are urging anyone to do, because they did issue that stern warning today. Anyone caught helping him, thinking about helping him, yeah, they're going to get the full extent of the full hammer of the law cracking down on them, because, yeah, they really want this guy bad, and understandably so. This is manhunt day 12. Will there be a day 13? Well, it's kind of looking that way, Hallie.
We'll see. George Solis live for us there in Chester County. George, thank you for being all over it. In just the last few hours, we've seen the FDA approving new COVID booster shots from Pfizer and Moderna, even as hospitalizations are going up around the country because of COVID. These shots, these boosters, target one of the subvariants, and people could start getting them as soon as this week, as long as the CDC gives its green light, too. Nearly 70% of Americans are considered fully vaccinated, but only 17% of people actually got the most recent booster. I want to bring in Dr. Akshay Syal. Is there any reason to believe more people will get this round of boosters, perhaps because there has been an uptick in the number of people getting sick from COVID?
Well, yeah, and that's certainly the hope, Hallie. But I will say, with every booster that comes out, we do see less and less people get it. And I think the biggest thing that's going to drive the uptake of the booster, Hallie, unfortunately, is how big of a wave we see this upcoming fall and winter season. Because what we've seen is people tend to get these shots, either COVID, flu, or Mpox, monkeypox, if the disease hits close to home. If friends and family are getting it, then they suddenly run to the pharmacy to get the booster. So I think, there's not a lot of enthusiasm for these right now, unfortunately, but I think that could change depending on how this fall and winter season goes. But Hallie, just to set the expectations for these boosters, you still may get sick if you get the booster. The point of these boosters is to keep you out of the hospital, keep you from flooding the healthcare system, from being in an ICU. And these boosters have shown time and time again to do a fantastic job at doing that. So it's important we set expectations here, Hallie.
Dr. Akshay Sayal, smart to do. Thank you very much. We are just learning late tonight that Hurricane Lee is shifting a little bit, maybe putting parts of New England in its track. This is still a Category 3 storm. It's the one we've been talking about. It's in the Atlantic. It was kind of a monster Cat 5. Now it's gotten a little bit smaller. But look, you can see it is shifting slightly to the east. Still a few days out, so things could change before it makes landfall. But either way, beaches up and down the East Coast are already today getting some rough surf and some dangerous rip currents. The Atlantic hurricane season is running well above what's considered normal. We've already seen 3 big hurricanes so far. That's as much as we'd see in a typical season. Let me bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns, who is watching all of this for us. So does this mean that if I'm living in Maine, if I live in Cape Cod, if I live in New England, I should be feeling nervous, Bill, or not yet?
You should be prepared. I don't know about nervous yet. I mean, there is the possibility we're going to have power outages. It looks like this is going to hit somewhere as a, Category 1 or a strong tropical storm, or maybe if it's transitioning to what we call like a powerful extratropical storm, almost like a nor'easter. That's going to bring significant tree damage and power outages. So that's why we could have the possibility of maybe even a couple days or weeks wherever it gets the worst of the wind. So the Hurricane Center's track does have it missed Bermuda. Happy for them. It does have it weakening as it goes over cooler water. We knew that would happen. So what we're left with by the time we get to the weekend is going to be, a low-end Category 1 tropical storm, or getting to like a powerful nor'easter extratropical storm. But that cone does go from Boston to Cape, the islands. It's approaching the Maine coastline and areas of Nova Scotia. Escaping without hitting someone looks very unlikely at this point. Our computer models are bringing it northwards and then take a little bit of a right turn. It's been a long time since we've had a direct landfall into areas of Maine. 1969 was the last time we had a hurricane make landfall in Maine. So maybe that won't happen, but we still could see these strong winds with this storm as we go throughout the next couple days. And here's a look at those past storms that have hit Maine before. So, Hallie, this isn't like California where it's never happened before, but this is a portion of the country that it doesn't happen all that often. And the big concern is wherever it goes, trees with leaves on them and power outages. That's the big issue.
Yeah, that's going to be the concern. Bill Cairns, thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. Tonight, with the clock ticking fast, the big auto workers union says it is ready to negotiate 24/7 to try to avoid a strike against the big car companies. We're supposed to be getting some new details, perhaps soon, on one of those companies' new offers after they met with United Auto Workers, the union, over the weekend. The workers are threatening to walk out if they don't come to terms with General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, Chrysler's parent company, by Thursday at midnight. So Thursday, I should say 11:59 p.m., night into Friday morning. The UAW wants a pay raise, a shorter work week, better health care, and a better pension. I want to bring in Brian Chung with more on this. So here we are Monday night. It's going to be Tuesday night, then Wednesday night, and then Thursday night. And that's where the rubber really meets the road. There have been some expectations that perhaps a strike is maybe inevitable here. Do you get the sense, based on your reporting, that it is, or is there still wiggle room?
Yeah, and Hallie, industry analysts that I've been hearing from over the past few days have said that essentially they are expecting a strike to happen. And one reason why is because of just numerically how far these parties are apart on the wage bid. So again, the UAW, as you mentioned, is asking for quite a lot, a 46% wage bump compounded over the next 4-year period that this contract would cover. But the best that the automakers have offered so far is 14.5, that coming from Stellantis, the maker of Chrysler. And what also makes these talks different than the last time there were auto union negotiations in 2019 is the fact that this new UAW president wants to negotiate with all 3 of these companies at the same time, whereas in the past, they've historically gone after one company, made a deal with them, and then copied and pasted the agreement with the other 2 companies. So whether or not they can get across the finish line with all 3 before Thursday night, as you mentioned, the odds just don't look very good. But again, we'll have to see how this plays out. There are talks being had between the union and the 3 automakers over time. We already have 3 offers from each of them, so that conversation and contact is being had. But whether or not they can find that middle ground before Thursday night remains an open question, Hallie.
What's the biggest sticking point? What's like the thorniest piece of this year where people seem dug in? Is it the money? Is it the work week hours? Is it the retirement plans?
Yeah, it's wages. Now, retirement plans and other things like healthcare benefits are part of those conversations as well. But again, the union says, look, we feel we're entitled to this because the companies have made more profits. The CEOs have gotten massive pays. But the companies are saying, look, we need to make sure that we're also preserving enough money to make sure that we can compete in this new EV world. That's the long-term future that they're thinking about. So whether or not they can find that middle ground, again, that's the major question. Money at the end of the day is always the case when it comes to these types of contract negotiations.
Brian Chung, thank you very much. I know you're watching it. Coming up, a moment that could make history for the Supreme Court session about to happen in Israel, why it means thousands of people are out protesting in the streets. Plus, new details tonight after one of the highest paid coaches in college sports has been suspended. That's next. The last-minute deal is making some football fans pretty happy. We'll tell you why in the 5 things. But first, the FDA is now looking into whether a common ingredient found in a lot of this cold medicine you might buy at the drugstore, whether it actually works. Phenylephrine is a drug that's used as a decongestant. It's in liquids, it's in pills, it's in nose sprays. You've probably taken it if you're feeling stuffed up or just generally kind of gross. You've taken some kind of medicine for it. It's in Sudafed PE, Vicks Sinex, Benadryl allergy plus congestion. So when you take this, like by a pill, if you swallow it or take it via your mouth, it takes a little bit to get processed in your gut and in your liver before it actually gets into your bloodstream to have any effect. So pharmacists and doctors say, hey, not much of this drug may actually be making it to where it needs to go. Some doctors don't even recommend this stuff at all. If it is decided that phenylephrine is not effective when taken via mouth, you could pull it off the shelves altogether. Ann Thompson is joining us now. Help us understand this idea that some of the stuff we take for our colds may not actually work on our colds at all.
I know, Hallie. It really sort of seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Especially when you consider that phenylephrine has been considered generally recommended, safe, and effective since the 1970s. But since 2005, there have been a growing number of studies that have looked at the effectiveness of what's commonly called PE. And these studies have found in some cases that it's no more effective than a placebo. That's if you take PE in a pill or liquid form. In a nasal spray, it still works. So the FDA is looking at this narrow lane, if you will, and looking at whether PE works in medicines, like you said, Sudafed PE or Dayquil and NyQuil Severe. You'll see phenylephrine on the ingredient label. So that's what they're going to decide. And then this will begin, if they decide it is not effective, this will begin the long process of whether the FDA will pull that generally recommended safe and effective designation from PE and ultimately take those products off the shelf.
There's a difference, though, between this drug and the kind that you have to go to ask your pharmacist to give to you over the counter, right?
Right. That's something called pseudoephedrine. And that is, you'll find it in plain old Sudafed and other types of medicines. You don't need a prescription for that. You just need to talk to your pharmacist, and it's behind the counter because way back when, 20 years or ago, people could buy a lot of it and make meth out of it. So they moved the medicine behind the counter to limit how much people bought at any one time. That is effective. That is not in question. And we talked to other doctors who said, look for those 24-hour antihistamines. Those work. Anything with D in it, basically like Claritin D or something like that, those work. It's the medicines with PE in their name. Those are the ones that are in question.
Ann Thompson, thank you so much for breaking that down. We'll see what happens there. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, more than 2,000 people could be dead after incredible flooding in Libya. According to leaders there, you can see how bad the streets were. At least 61 people have been confirmed killed. Thousands are missing. But that doesn't include numbers from the city of Derna, which seems to be the hardest hit. An East Libyan leader said it was declared a disaster zone because of the flooding triggered by a massive Mediterranean storm. Number 2, Michigan State University has suspended its head football coach, Mel Tucker, less than a day after a USA Today report about harassment allegations. A third-party investigation ended in July, but university officials said other matters still need to be played out. A hearing set for next month on whether Tucker violated the school's sexual harassment policy. Number 3, the American Red Cross says there's a national blood shortage and it needs donations ASAP. They've had to cancel blood drives because of climate disasters, and in some other places, there have been fewer donations altogether. The Red Cross says the national blood supply fell by almost a quarter since in just the last month, so it's down to what it describes as critically low levels. Number 4, Disney and Charter have reached a deal to end the blackout fight today, just in time for people who really wanted to watch Monday Night Football. That means millions of Charter customers can watch the game on ESPN now. As part of the deal, some of Charter's Spectrum customers will get Disney Plus and ESPN Plus included in their cable packages. Number 5, Elon Musk has a third child with on-again, off-again girlfriend Grimes. They had apparently kept the identity of this child a secret, and we're now learning about it thanks to an upcoming biography about Musk. His name, Techno Mechanicus. So the government taking on Google less than 24 hours from now in what is set to be the biggest trial of its kind in decades and one that could make history. The question, is Google too powerful? Is it a monopoly? The government says yes. Google says no. But if Google loses, it could change the way we all use the internet. Jake Ward has more.
When you go to search the web from almost any phone, Google is your default way of doing it. But that's no coincidence. Google pays Apple and others to make sure that's the case. Now, a suit from the Department of Justice and a coalition of 39 states asks, do those deals keep competitors out of the market and give Google illegal dominance in the process?
Essentially, every smartphone that people get has Google as the default search, and it's baked into everything. And that means we don't have a competitive advertising market.
Google has about 88% of the domestic search market and over 70% of the market for the ads you see when you search, which is most of how the company makes money. But the company argues that using Google isn't mandatory and that Apple and others chose to charge for the default placement, a perfectly legal arrangement.
We think there are a lot of different ways people are choosing to get information these days. And on the choice side, it's never been easier for people at home to be able to choose a different web search.
United States versus Google is in many ways United States versus big tech, a test of whether the government has legal authority to rein in corporations that wield historic power over how we access information. The government is hoping to do better than the Federal Trade Commission has. The case goes to trial after a string of recent court losses for the FTC, which has unsuccessfully tried to stop acquisitions by companies like Microsoft and Meta. But an anti-monopoly nonprofit says these are the right battles to fight.
A very intentional effort has been made for the past 50 years to chip away at the federal antitrust laws and to make them harder to enforce. And right now, the monopolies of our time are increasingly in big tech.
Google faces more than just this case. An antitrust suit filed in January accuses it of also being a monopoly as it sells the technology that powers the way online ads are placed across the web, and that's its second largest source of revenue. Google says the market is wide open there, too. But Google's biggest worry at the moment is presumably not this case. It is instead the rise of AI-powered chatbots like ChatGPT, which threaten to replace the classic search engine that made Google one of history's richest institutions. Its business model under attack in the market, even as it must also defend it in court.
Jake is joining us now. Jake, I think we got to lay out the stakes here, right? Huge deal. There's one expert who called this the antitrust trial of the century. I mean, this is the government taking on Google here. What does it mean for everybody else if, in fact, the DOJ, the government, were to win?
Well, Hallie, it would definitely be a big turning point. Everybody is basically watching this to see whether, as we enter this era of AI and incredible power on the part of big tech, whether authorities at the state or federal level have the opportunity to steer that boat, or whether tech companies are going to basically enjoy the same kind of unregulated, largely unregulated environment that they have until now, Hallie.
Jake Ward, thank you very much. We'll be talking more about this one, I am sure, in the days to come. When we come back, I'll go one-on-one with one of the change makers in the last presidential cycle with what he thinks of the next election. That's in tonight's Newsmaker. Plus, that is not water flooding the streets of Portugal. Why you may need a straw for this one later in the Global. Some new concern tonight for Democrats over what the latest polls show is a really tight 2024 race between President Biden and former President Trump. With Mr. Trump polling better right now than he did at any point in the run-up to the 2020 election. Take a look at some of these recent numbers from a few big pollsters. relative ties, essentially, right, for Mr. Trump, with more than half of Democrats telling NBC News in our latest poll that they want President Biden to step aside. Among those who think we should have more options across the board, former 2020 candidate Andrew Yang and founder of the centrist Forward Party. He's calling for President Biden to engage more with third-party candidates. He even wants him to debate Democratic challenger Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Andrew Yang is joining us now. Mr. Yang, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Hallie.
Of course. So listen, we just laid out some of those poll numbers showing that this is, in many ways, a far closer race than presumably President Biden's team would like to see. I know you're not a part of the Democratic Party officially any longer, but I wonder what you make of that, the fact that this does seem to be such a neck-and-neck competition 14 months out.
It's deeply troubling and distressing to a lot of Americans that we may have a Trump victory in 2024, as hard as it is to say that sentence out loud. And I'm someone who thinks that the Democrats should have a more robust primary process so that if it is Joe, that people are confident in his vitality and energy. And if it's someone other than Joe, then maybe we could have someone who generates a whole different type of excitement and enthusiasm among Democrats and Americans.
You talk about the potential for a Democratic primary, a more robust primary in the Democratic field. One of the things that you said recently was that you believe that President Biden should debate one of his Democratic challengers, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We've talked about him on our show, his positions. He is polling, 50-plus points behind President Biden right now. You know, it is not typically the tradition for a sitting president to debate any comer, if you will. Why do you think this debate should happen?
Well, I think for both supporters of Robert Kennedy and Marianne Williamson, it would make them feel like they were heard, like their candidate had a real forum. And then it makes it less likely that one of them, let's say Robert Kennedy, would run in the general as an independent or even a libertarian, which right now I see as a distinct possibility. And he'd have a point because he'd say, look, I never even got a fair shake. There was never any real debate, so it's on to the general. And if you look at the neck-and-neck polling in the general, one of the main things that could determine the outcome is whether there are candidates running as a Green Party or independent or libertarian or some other ticket.
You talk about this idea, right, of a third-party candidacy. Senator Bill Cassidy was on Chuck Todd, our colleague's final edition of Meet the Press, just 24 hours ago, talking about the idea of a no-labels potential candidacy. Now, I know that your, Forward, who you work with, of course, with the goal of giving people an alternative, you've already said you're not going to run a third-party candidate this election. But let me play for you what the senator had to say.
It is something you'd be open to.
Yes, put it this way. 70% of the American people want something different. Should there be another option for the American people? And I think plausibly there should be.
In a race that could depend on the will of, as you know, just a few thousand voters, do you believe that no labels is encouraging potential for spoiler candidates, so-called?
Well, if you have $1 trillion franchise like American democracy, it makes sense to me to invest in an alternative. But I have looked at the numbers. One reason why Forward has said, look, we're staying out of this particular cycle is that, for example, if I ran, I think I would increase the chances of Donald Trump winning. And I'm an anyone but Trump guy. I personally would not do something that would increase the chances of Trump winning. So if we had a more modern voting system like ranked choice voting, then you'd have more alternatives, and that's something that Forward is championing. But given the current system, I'm a numbers guy, I'm a math guy. If you look at the numbers, someone like me running would probably lead to something very, very negative.
You talk about Americans wanting choice. That's been one of the sort of foundations of Forward, of the things that you've talked about here. There's a lot of options on the Republican side, right? There's almost a dozen candidates, but you know where former President Trump stands. He's leading most national polls by like 30, close to 40 points here. Why do you think nobody else in that field is gaining traction?
Well, Donald Trump has a very strong relationship with the base. He was the president, and he'd established something of a public persona over the previous years. So if you imagine a new candidate on the scene trying to somehow catch up to Trump and surpass him in the public consciousness, particularly among the Republican base, it's a lot to do in a very short period of time. It's one reason why I expect that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, unfortunately. I publicly donated to Chris Christie in part as an anti-Trump effort. I'll support just about anyone who's running against Trump. But as a math guy, like you said, he's up 35, 40 points. I don't see that changing by early next year. And so you probably will have a Trump nomination out of the Republican Party.
If you could give the Biden campaign any advice, not that they necessarily might want to hear it from you, sir, but if you could, what would you say?
I would say, look, we need to tackle the issue of succession. The reality is that I campaigned for Joe Biden. I voted for Joe Biden. And I think Joe Biden was the right candidate for 2020. But there are a lot of people who are reasonable and traditional mainline Democrats who are saying, look, I wish that we had other choices. And when you talk about the robust Democratic primary, I would like to see, I'm talking about Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Gavin Newsom, Governor J.B. Pritzker, Governor Phil Murphy, Governor Roy Cooper. Imagine that debate stage. We're not talking about the folks who are currently running necessarily. There are a lot of very qualified, eminent Democrats who've been told not to run because the DNC said, hey, wait your turn 4 years from now. We do not have 4 years. The American people deserve a real choice this cycle. And if we end up with the wrong candidate and something unfortunate happens, we could wind up giving the country back to Trump. The American people deserve better than that.
Will you campaign for President Biden again, do you think?
Again, I'm an anyone but Trump guy, and I think that there are a few things we could do that would decrease the chances of a Trump presidency. Democratic primary is one, supporting his opponents is another, and I'll be doing anything I can in succession to try and keep Trump from becoming president again in 2024.
I know that we're talking lots about politics. That's obviously the big news. You have your own big personal news, which is your book out tomorrow. It's called The Last Election, and it's sort of, in broad strokes, centers on this sort of third-party candidate who's gaining steam in the election, et cetera. You said something interesting in a statement, that this falls in, as you describe it, the long tradition of paranoid political thrillers. But this time, you say, the paranoia is very much justified. Explain that.
So there's something called a contingent election, Hallie, that if no one gets a majority in the Electoral College, then it gets thrown to the states, with each state getting one vote. Now, this is something that has not come to pass in American life during our lifetimes, but it's something that becomes a more and more real possibility, where in this coming cycle, Cornel West is running. As I said, I think RFK may run in the general. You talked about potential no labels unity ticket. You could have 3, 4, or 5 candidates. And in that scenario, you could wind up with things that we have not seen in decades in American life. So a lot of unimaginable things are back on the table, and we have to be aware of them to hopefully modernize our way out of it.
Andrew Yang, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. You can pick up The Last Election tomorrow anywhere books are sold. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it'd be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our foreign desk has done it for you. Here is some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Israel, look at this. Thousands of protesters rallying outside the Supreme Court in Jerusalem just hours before a hearing that could make history there. For the first time ever, all 15 Supreme Court judges will meet. They will hear appeals against that very controversial amendment that would limit the court's own powers. People have been demonstrating against this plan every week since it was first announced back in January. Out of Poland, the Catholic Church is doing something it has never done before. It beatified a whole family, meaning it moved them one step closer to sainthood during a special mass. Why? Nazis killed this family during World War II. For sheltering Jewish people. Pope Francis spoke from the Vatican, saying the family, in his words, represented a ray of light in the darkness. And out of Portugal, you know that one glass of spilled red wine can make a mess. Well, this is what happened when you spill 500,000 gallons of it. Yes, there was an accident at a distillery, so this red river ended up flowing through the streets of a village in Portugal. Officials say a couple of tanks at this place burst and dumped out enough wine to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool. I will leave you to make your own quips about that one. Coming up here on the show, a lot more to get to, including one of the women Danny Masterson was convicted of raping, speaking exclusively with NBC News. What she's saying about some character letters from some famous celebrities next. In an NBC News exclusive, we are hearing now for the first time from one of the 2 women that 70s show star Danny Masterson was convicted of raping. This is since his sentence here. The woman, identified in the trials as Jane Doe No. 1, tells NBC the sentence seemed like justice to her, adding it was nothing extra and nothing less. Masterson now faces 30 years to life in prison. This interview is coming just days after actors Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher, who were, of course, co-stars with Masterson on that 70s show, it propelled them all to fame, apologized for their character witness letters defending Masterson. Listen.
They were intended for the judge to read and not to undermine the testimony of the victims or re-traumatize them in any way. We would never want to do that. And we're sorry if that has taken place.
Kunis's letter had described Masterson as, I'm quoting here, an amazing friend, confidant, and above all, an outstanding older brother figure. Kutcher described him as an excellent role model and an extraordinary, honest, and intentional human being. I want to bring in Steve Patterson now with more. So let me start here with what we're hearing now exclusively from Jane Doe 1, who is also kind of sharing her thoughts on this apology video from Kunis and from Kutcher. Tell us about it.
Well, first, Hallie, if I could, I'd like to set up sort of the overall discourse, because it's more than just this Jane Doe, which we got that exclusive statements for. There's a lot of discourse online, especially, and it's sort of sickening the regularity that we cover the misbehavior of celebrities and the cancellation of celebrities that I sort of knew where to look, which is the fact that all comments on that apology video are delisted. So if you look at the next video down, you will find vitriol and a lot of criticism and the overall sentiment that this apology was more apologizing because they got caught and less about a direct, sort of thorough, somber message to sex assault victims, which I think is what a lot of people would have liked. So this is pretty widespread, that sentiment, and that sort of relates to what Jane Doe number 1, this person that we got the statement from, pertains to say. She writes in a statement, and I want to show it on camera for you. She says that, quote, "This video was incredibly insulting and hurtful. My hope is that they learn radical accountability and that the importance of self-education to learn when to keep their privilege in check, especially Ashton, who claims to work with victims of sex crimes, and Mila, I can only think of times up." That's alluding, of course, to Ashton Kutcher, who's done a lot of work relating to sexual assault victims and trying to prevent sort of sexual misbehavior over the course of almost a decade now. So we have that. There's also other celebrities speaking out, like Christina Ricci, who's been telling folks that, you know, although we know these quote-unquote awesome people, that they can misbehave in ways that we have no idea about as well. She threw up this on her Instagram. Unfortunately, I've known lots of awesome guys who are lovely to me, but have been prone to abusive privately. So this is sort of the sentiment that we're hearing a lot from celebrities, but also a lot from just normal people, sex survivors themselves, sex abuse survivors themselves, who say that this is not good enough, and they want to hear more from this celebrity couple. Hallie.
Steve Patterson, thank you very much for that reporting. Appreciate it. Yeah. So before we let you go, we got a little breaking news of our own to share with you, because we are welcoming into the world the newest member of our Hallie Jackson Now family. Meet Teddy, 7 pounds, 3 ounces, 100% Mets fan. His dad, Sully, is one of our incredible producers here. He says Mom Shannon is doing great. So is this little baby Teddy. We are sending so much love to them and to their family. Our first teen baby, by the way, since our show launched. We're just glad Teddy made it in time for the first of many Monday Night Football games for him. Super exciting. We're excited for Sully and for Shannon and Teddy. That does it for us for this hour. We've got more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.